Picture this. It's a totally normal Tuesday morning, October 29th. You sit down, you go to log into work, and nothing. Just nothing. It feels like a huge chunk of the internet has just vanished. And spoiler alert, it wasn't your Wi-Fi. It was something way, way bigger. Today, we're going to break down that massive Microsoft Azure outage that caused all that chaos, and we're going to ask the big question: what happens when the cloud actually fails?
So does this sound at all familiar? You were maybe trying to get into Microsoft 365 to start your workday, or maybe the kids were just trying to jump into a game of Minecraft and... nope, just the spinning wheel. Well, you were definitely not alone. Millions of people all over the world suddenly found their entire digital lives had just slammed to a halt.
And this thing went way beyond just Microsoft stuff. The ripple effect was just enormous. It took down the app you used to get your morning coffee at Starbucks. It messed with Costco. It even took down the check-in systems for Alaska Airlines. It's a perfect illustration of this hidden, digital supply chain that runs our world. So many different companies are all quietly leaning on the exact same cloud infrastructure, which means when Microsoft's platform stumbled, they all went down right along with it.
This post from X, I think, just perfectly captures the feeling of that day. Yeah, technically, it wasn't the entire internet that broke, but for a massive number of people, it sure felt like it was. The services we count on for work, for talking to each other, for just having fun, they just poofed. Gone.
So, how in the world did this actually happen? Let's get into what I'm calling the digital domino effect and really see how one single failure cascaded into this huge global event.
So, the first signs of real trouble came from this absolute flood of user reports on sites like Down Detector, and the data here is pretty telling. The biggest spike in problems, a whopping 41%, came from system administrators who were suddenly locked out of their own control panels. Now think about that for a second. The very people whose job it is to fix things couldn't even get into their systems to start fixing things, a huge problem right off the bat.
And, well, this comment perfectly sums up the mood among the tech folks who are trying to deal with the chaos. This incredibly blunt post from a user on the sysadmin subreddit kind of became the unofficial slogan for the day. It's short, it's definitely not safe for work, but man, it perfectly described the scale of what they were all facing.
Okay, so with reports just pouring in from every corner of the globe, the hunt was on to find the source. You had engineers starting to follow this trail of digital breadcrumbs, all trying to find that one single point of failure that was responsible for the whole cascade.
It became pretty clear, pretty fast, that this wasn't a bunch of different, separate problems. Nope, all roads were leading back to one place: Microsoft Azure. For anyone who doesn't know, Azure is Microsoft's gigantic cloud computing platform. It is the digital foundation that runs not only Microsoft's own stuff like Office and Xbox, but also thousands and thousands of other companies' services too.
And then you have this moment of just beautiful, perfect irony. The one place everyone was told to go to for updates, the official Azure status page, was also down. As this Reddit user pointed out, you couldn't even check on the problem because the tool for checking on the problem was also broken by the problem. You just can't make this stuff up.
Okay, so we know the where was Azure. Now we get to the what. This is where we get right to the heart of the outage, to the one tiny little change that brought this entire system to its knees.
The culprit was a service called Azure Front Door. You can basically think of it as the main traffic director for all of Microsoft Cloud services. It's the first place your request goes when you try to log into Teams or start a game on Xbox, and its job is to send you to the right place, super fast and super secure.
So after hours of frantic searching, Microsoft finally released its official diagnosis. It wasn't some crazy cyber attack. It wasn't a massive hardware failure. It was, and I'm quoting them directly here, an inadvertent configuration change. That's it. One single simple mistake. An error in a line of code, or maybe a setting that got pushed live, and the whole thing came tumbling down.
Probably the best way to understand this is with an analogy. So just imagine Azure is a huge, sprawling city. Now, Azure Front Door is the entire highway system that's designed to get traffic into that city. That one faulty configuration change, it was basically like a command that instantly closed every single on-ramp to every single highway, all at once. The city itself, all the services, all the data, it was still there, still running just fine, but absolutely nobody could get it.
So, if a single tiny change broke literally everything, how did they fix it? Let's take a look at the recovery process and see how Microsoft's engineers managed to reopen all those digital highways. The solution was, at least in principle, pretty straightforward. They started what's called a rollback. It's basically like hitting the undo button on a massive scale.
They reverted the system back to the last version of the configuration that they knew for a fact worked correctly. And at the same time, they started rerouting traffic around all the problem areas to get services back online as fast as they possibly could. But you know, straightforward doesn't always mean fast. And this timeline here, it really shows you just how long this whole recovery took. The outage kicked off around 4 p.m. UTC, but it took over an hour for engineers just to figure out what the likely cause was. The fix didn't even start getting deployed until after 7 p.m., and getting things fully back to normal stretched well into the next day. This was a marathon, not a sprint, and a really good reminder that undoing a problem like this is never instant.
And this number right here really drives that point home. Even late into the night, when things were getting a lot better, Azure was running at 98% availability. Now, 98% sounds great, right? But for a service on this kind of scale, that leftover 2% still means a huge number of users and services were still having problems while they worked on what they called the tail-end recovery.
So, eventually the services all came back online, but the whole mess left behind some really serious questions about the very foundation of our digital world. This wasn't just some technical glitch, it was a massive stress test of the entire cloud computing idea.
This Reddit comment, yeah, it's pretty cynical, but it totally gets to the heart of the anxiety here. We've been told over and over that the cloud is the future. It's more resilient, it's more reliable. But this event was a masterclass in the danger of a single point of failure. By putting so many critical services onto just a few massive platforms, we've created a system where one person's typo can have a truly global impact. It really makes you wonder, is this whole thing making us stronger or just a lot more vulnerable?
And that really leaves us with this one final thought. Look, the cloud has enabled incredible things. No one's denying that. But this outage is a really stark reminder of just how fragile it can be. As we keep building more and more of our lives, our businesses, and even our critical infrastructure on these platforms run by just a handful of tech giants, we have to stop and ask ourselves, are we building on solid rock or are we building on sand that's just one mistake away from washing out to sea?